So Alex, what do you think is the biggest challenges, sort of facing both rugby and the tomorrow's coaches?
I think understanding your players is so important for coaches now. And you've got big squads, you've got different personalities, you've got so much going on. I think the rugby is one side of it, but it's managing your players and making sure that they turn up for the day and training in sort of peak mental performance levels, because that's where you get the best out of them. But as we know, human beings, whatever walk of life, there's always things going on in our lives that sometimes don't allow us to perform at the levels we want to. And I've said it before to you guys that there's four areas that we look at. There's the technical side, the skillful side of the players, which doesn't change much week to week. You can tweak a few things, but ultimately habits are hardwired into you. And it takes time to either instill a good habit or undo a bad one. Physically, players don't change much week to week. There's a certain level of fitness that you can only do, progressively, and it takes time to get strong or get fast. And tactically, teams don't change too much week to week. And the big thing that changes week to week is the mental state of your players, of your team, of your coaching staff, your environment. And so much can happen from week to week. And for us as coaches, it's really important that you understand where your players are and know when to push, know when to pull. Do they need an arm around them? Do they need a proverbial kick up the backside? And there's different ways of managing your team, and understanding where those players are is absolutely crucial to get the best out of them.
Do you feel that players have changed, since COVID? Do you feel that the way that we have to sort of deal with players and have to coach has changed, since that period?
I don't know if it's COVID. I think there's sort of people on their screens a lot more. I think people's attention spans have changed, and that includes myself. I used to read a lot of books. I probably don't read as much as I used to. I think people want information which is delivered in a way that there's a hook. I think the days of long presentations, I think people's ability to take on huge amounts of information are gone. I don't know why. I see it with a lot of people, and I'm no different. And it's now a case of how could you get your message across with real clarity to make sure that what you've delivered is actionable and it's been taken on board by your players.
So as a coach, then, Alex, you mentioned you've obviously got a big squad of players. In a rugby squad, typically 30 players in an international squad. You've got a range of ages within that squad. So you might have the sort of 18-year-old breakout star versus a sort of 30, 35-year-old coming towards the end, sort of grizzled veteran. So as a coach, how would you manage that communication? Because that 18-year-old is probably going to, like to your point, ingest information in a very different way to maybe that 35-year-old, and the outcome where they are mentally for the stage of their career would differ. So how would you kind of approach communicating with those ends of the spectrum, and I guess everyone in between?
Yeah, Steve, it's a real challenge. And I think, one thing I've learned over the last couple of decades is that everyone learns in different ways. And I suppose the role of the coach is to understand each and every player. There has to be obviously times when the coach has to make a decision on how he presents, but it's understanding that maybe sometimes players need the visual, some players need to do it on the field, some people need to see it on paper, some people see it on video, and you can't cater for everyone in a meeting, but you'd hopefully over the course of the week make sure you get your message across for every player, however that looks. Also, some players like working in bigger groups. Some guys become much more chatty and a lot more open when they're in smaller groups. They feel less reserved. And again, it's about coaches understanding your players as much as possible, and sometimes having conversations away from the training field or away from the meeting room, and just finding about what makes them click, what gets them the best version of themselves. And I always go back to trying to be as authentic as possible, because I think when you're authentic, I think people trust you a little bit more. Players pick up pretty quickly whether you're putting on a bit of an act. So I think the more authentic you can be, the more honest you can be. I think players then can feel that they're in a safe place to be themselves, and as well.
And we talk a lot about players, communication to the players, how they take on information, how they feel, sort of trials and tribulations of being a player. But what about you, as a coach? You've done both of these roles. You've been a top level player and a, coached at international level. And we don't hear a lot about, I guess, the stress points for coaches and how they feel. I guess fans just see it as someone to shout at when the team isn't playing very well. It's always the coach's fault, really, the players. So how do you, as a coach, go around, understanding yourself, how you're doing, how you're developing, in that kind of same environment when much of the focus is more on the players?
I think it's the key is to work with the good people around you. So it's really important you speak to the players. I think the days of the coach having all the input with all the solutions is over. The players are the ones on the field. They're the ones who are encountering the problems, the challenges they face. And it's up to us as coaches to provide them with an environment where they can challenge the status quo sometimes, create environments in training where they're having to solve problems. If they're not solving problems in training, how can you expect them to solve problems in the field? And also for coaches, it's important to work as a team. You can't work in silos. You can't work on your own because the game is so interconnected. And it's making sure that those conversations, you're bouncing ideas off people for the good of the team. But I'll go back to using the players as much as possible in the decision-making process. So then when they're on the field, they are really believing and leading it with real conviction and clarity.
And just one more for me. Do you think sports, whether that's rugby, football, any other sport really, does enough to help manage players, especially those kids who don't make it? So they've been told they're brilliant, they're the 1%, they're going to be the next whoever. And then at 15, 16, 17, having lived and breathed their dream of, I'm going to be a rugby player or a football player, it's just pulled from them. Suddenly they're not part of that 0.5% rather than the 1% who are going to make it. And likewise, at the end of a career, when that player has got to 30, 35, been in that top 0.5%, and they've been the best of the best to make it, and suddenly that contract comes to an end, and then the club's like, okay, well, we're moving on now onto someone else. Do you think there's enough either end of that cycle to help players cope with what comes with that decision making?
I think it's probably improved from where it was, but I still think there's gaps in the welfare of those players, especially the young ones. From my point of view, I think you should want kids, players at 15, 16, they're still kids. You want them to play, fall in love with the game. So whether they are pros or not pros, that they play the game and for the rest of their lives. And I worry sometimes that kids get told they are not good enough at a certain age, and they deem that as failure. And they might not develop physically, develop mentally, develop technically, and therefore I just worry sometimes that we make a decision on a player far too young without them being fully mature mentally and physically. And I don't have all the answers. I just know that there needs to be more support for these players to make sure that they thrive, whatever level they get to. And also in retirement as well. I think a lot of players struggle coming out of being in a very structured week. They're told what to wear, what to eat, where to be, and they're part of a team. And through the ups and downs of being in a team, you share the good and you stick together in the tough times. But when you leave that environment, it can be very, very difficult. And I've got a lot of friends who've struggled with that because you lose a little bit of your reason for getting up in the morning. It's important, you go to something that gives you a little bit of pride and you enjoy, and something to aspire to. I think that doesn't matter whatever walk of life you're in. You want to get up in the morning with purpose, And as I said, I think things have improved, but I think there's a huge way to go.
Thanks, Alex.
Pleasure.